How's it going, guys? And today we're going to be talking about an album that is very special and it was released more than 5 years ago. Now, probably should have done this back in May, so we could have had a nice little anniversary video there, but it still is the anniversary video. So, we're talking about Linkin Park's One More Light. This was the last Linkin Park album to ever be released, and it may remain that way. I don't think that it is, but it definitely remains to be seen. I mean, they did do a performance after they said that they weren't going to, which happened this year, I believe. But what makes this album also so special is that this album was released 2 months before Chester Bennington, the lead singer of this band, passing away due to suicide. And I did a video back then. I'll link you to it when he passed away. It was extremely sad. It was also a little bit awkward because, hey, it's not like I delete videos like that or anything to try to hide it, but I was very unhappy when this album first came out. It wasn't really what I was looking for at the time. They had just got back into doing the style of music that I was into from Linkin Park and that many other people were into. And it was a little bit disappointing to see them going back the other way after they kind of were getting it right, or so, which I thought was getting it right. And that was with the Hunting Party back in 2014. So there was a 3-year gap, which is pretty normal. And they came back and they did One More Light. And it was a lot different than really any of the other albums that they'd done before them. I mean, really, if you go back and you listen to the albums in chronological order, you can see that Linkin Park kind of was experimenting a lot. Chester was experimenting a lot. And we ended up kind of getting this in the end. It was kind of pretty apparent that Chester really wanted to experiment and try different things. I mean, we'll just run through them real quickly here because I think it's important to have a little bit of retrospective before we talk about how well this album has aged. And I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, that I think that this album has actually aged, and there's a few different factors, a few controversial factors of why I think it's aged well, and it was a lot better than when I listened to it in 2017. Be honest with you, I didn't go back and listen to this even after he passed away. I'm sure a lot of people did. And tunes changed because people felt very bad, because there is a large part of people that feel that the criticism that he got on this album was responsible for him taking his own life. I don't think that was the reason. I think there was other factors at play. I think that's kind of over dramatizing the situation and, trying to add fuel to a fire that doesn't really need any more fuel added to it. So, Hybrid Theory, Meteora, obviously those are going to be their two most popular among fans, among old school fans. I mean, they're the first two albums. It's kind of like that with Slipknot and a lot of other, new metal bands. So new metal always had this negative reputation, which I always thought was complete bullshit. There was nothing to be ashamed of new metal. I never understood this, why all of a sudden there's all these different genres of music, but for some reason new metal just kind of felt like you were doing something bad. People referring to it as a guilty pleasure, which was completely nonsensical, because there's a ton of songs that people take so seriously, but if we were to analyze them here, I've made that video with Metalheads Suck. I absolutely hate this sophistication of metalheads where all of a sudden have monocles over our eyes and all sitting in big fancy chairs, with bookcases behind us, we're so astute, because we listen to certain bands and only certain types of metal and certain types of music. It's a bunch of hooey, to say the least. So what can really be said about Minutes to Midnight? there's a lot that could be said about that one. It was controversial. Many people thought that this was the beginning of the end for Linkin Park. They received heavy criticism, but I'll be honest with you. This one I instantly liked the minute I listened to it. Yeah, I think maybe many people will be very surprised by that, because this was an album that really got a lot of shit when it came out. Many people didn't like the style, that there was a more variety on here, less of a new metal sound, more of a hard rock sound, a little bit of a different direction. They were trying to do something, bringing them a little bit closer to pop rock, sort of more melodic in ways, which is maybe not even fair to say, because aren't there many songs on Hybrid Theory that were melodic? Like, take a song like In the End. Could you really consider that to be like a new metal song? I always kind of thought that to be more of a melodic sort of, I don't really know. It was definitely always a different sounding song that didn't really rely on what you'd think that a new metal song was supposed to sound like. So there was always elements of this going on. You could always bring up certain songs, but I guess with Minutes to Midnight, they were definitely more pronounced. They definitely went more in a different direction. There was still some pretty heavy songs that sounded pretty Hybrid Theory-ish or Meteor-ish. And that could be like What I've Done. There's been numerous examples that can be found on these on this particular album. But A Thousand Suns, this is where things really started to just change drastically. And maybe it's due to how drastic the change was, that it was so much. You know, you could even make the argument that even Metallica's change from like And Justice for All to the Black Album, you know, to the self-titled album. There was definitely a difference, but it wasn't like they just jumped into load and reload right away. You know, there was a nice evening out. No, A Thousand Suns feels like it hits you in the face hard with change, and too much change. And I went back and I listened to this one. This is not really a great album. It's a very experimental album. It's an album that, you know, doesn't really hit all the right notes with me. There's a lot of interludes. There's like 2 intro tracks that just, I don't understand how you have like 2 intro tracks. Like, one is enough, but to have 2, and they're very solemn, and really it's a boring album. There's some good moments on here, and it's kind of like when Mike Shinoda raps. That's kind of when it really starts to kind of pick up and feel a bit better. You know, I don't know, Chester on here, it just sounds like he's just kind of in a room, kind of depressed, and I get that's supposed to be the tone. It's a darker album, it's a moodier album, it's supposed to be somewhat of a political album, but the message is not even clear, and maybe that's good that it wasn't, because I hate when bands get political. I think you already know that. Because we're always bound to disagree, just to say the least. You know, if it's going to be political and it's from the current era, chances are it's going to be shit. So it's a good thing that the message was a bit skewed in translation. So Living Things. This is an album where I think things improved, and actually a lot. I'll never forget watching the video. I believe it was Burn It Down. Yeah, that was the one that they did the video for. And I listened to it, I was like, holy shit, they still have not gotten it right. I'm like, you know, we're playing guitar here, but we could barely hear the guitar over the electronics. And, you know, this was a time when, you know, I kind of had my pinky up, I kind of had my monocle on, and I wasn't being very, you know, open-minded to what they were trying to present. And it really is. I like Living Things. Living Things is a good album. It's a different sound. They sound more like you would expect Linkin Park to sound. It's less depressing, it's less moody and edgy and all the things that are wrong with A Thousand Suns, that is their worst album. I mean, I'm not going to pull any punches here. I really don't think that that is a good album at all. There's really just like only 2 songs on there that I really care for. But yeah, Living Things brings it back. The Hunting Party is a return to form of sorts. Now, don't get me wrong. This is no Meteora. It's no Hybrid Theory. It is without a doubt a Minutes to Midnight, basically. A lot of guest appearances from other artists. It's a good album because I like Minutes to Midnight. So more minutes is fine with me. So we take a little bit of break, and I'm skipping like Reanimated because like we're only talking about studio albums because we'll be here all day otherwise. Just to give you a little bit of background. So One More Light comes around. I listened to it one time on my way to work, and it was an album that doesn't really take up too much of your time. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, we're talking about an album that clocks in at I believe it's like 35 minutes and 22 seconds. I was looking at Spotify. I'm like used to seeing the approximate time at the bottom on my phone. It's at the top when you look at it on your computer. But yeah, this one. So now, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the tracks. Nobody Can Save Me. So, all right, we got to provide some context here. This album, when listening to it, thinking about Chester, thinking about what would happen 2 months later, like kind of changes this album. And this is why I was saying it's a little bit controversial. I think it kind of helps the quality of this album because we kind of see, it kind of shows a little bit with the lyrical content. I don't know if it was intentional, but this is, I wasn't getting this because maybe I just didn't understand where the artist Chester Bennington was coming from. It is definitely very heartfelt, and you could hear that from the opening track, Nobody Can Save Me. And this is kind of eerie. It really is. Like, I don't know. It's not really morbid. And yeah, I am wearing my Linkin Park shirt as I do this. But Nobody Can Save Me is definitely like a good way to open this one. And Good Goodbye. This is the only time that we hear Mike Shinoda actually rapping on here. And that's one of the things about this album. It's like they use Mike on guitar, but he's not really rapping. And the guitars are not really at the forefront, and that's kind of what's very disappointing. That there's not enough time for him to really shine on vocals, because Good Goodbye is the rap song. You've got Pusha T on here, which, he's been on the Gorillaz, album before, Humans. And I think he did a good job when he was on that album. And here, like, this is a pretty cool song. It's got a good flow to it. Talking to Myself, once again, I mean, that's like a song. It's another heartfelt one. Invisible, come on. I mean, Chester feeling alone, the lashing out. Heavy, I mean, this is a song that I did kind of like it when I first heard the album, but I was like, I don't know if this was kind of like Chester's way of saying like how many people would use the word that Linkin Park is not heavy anymore and it calls it heavy, but I think it was kind of like a heavy heart, kind of why things have to be so heavy, like carry the weight, a burden on your shoulder, like that sort of thing. It's a really sweet sounding, very mellow, chill song. All of these songs, like Sorry for Now, Halfway Right, can't really remember how that one goes, to be quite honest. They're just like, some songs like on certain albums, like they're like, they might necessarily be good, but listening to it is just like, sometimes you're like, okay, well, what was that one like again? So I'm guessing it was sort of forgettable. One More Light is a great song, really. I mean, that's another one. And then wrapping it up with Sharp Edges, which is an acoustic piece. I don't know. I mean, I like Sharp Edges. It kind of like playing it out because it's like this very sweet, solemn song, but somehow I feel like One More Light should have wrapped this whole thing up because it kind of gives it that, especially now in retrospect, it would have given that one extra little push, to really kind of round this out. As it kind of like the farewell album for Chester. Like it really seems like it was written in that style, and that's where it's like kind of weird in a way. I mean, I don't mean to say this, but like it was almost like a memoir he left behind. That's kind of the vibe I was getting from this one. Like the man kind of really let his heart out. I kind of understand like why he lashed out, because kind of know the frame of mind that he was in when he was doing this album, and then we see like the backlash. And I mean, I kind of understand that as an artist. I mean, it is very easy for us all to say, oh, this album sucks and everything. But like, I know that like doing videos on YouTube, like if I do like a video game retrospective and it doesn't get a lot of views, it's very disappointing. Even though there are comments from people reassuring me that it's good, it's still disappointing to like work several hours on something or something like this. I mean, this didn't take several hours. I'm sure it took days, weeks, months to record and get right and, make the production sound as good as it does. I'm sure it's very, very disappointing to a person as talented as Chester Bennington was to hear people really revile your work, tell you suck, tell you you're horrible. And I was guilty of doing that. I'm not going to like go back and apologize for my behavior because like no one thinks that those extremes are going to happen. We are allowed to say, even after someone passed away, if an album is good or bad. If you don't like this album, you don't have to feel guilty about it because you're not committing a crime. You're not doing anything in bad taste. I mean, there's people who've made albums that, like there's some albums from like Dio that I don't like, I don't think like all the songs he wrote were just amazing. We don't all have to bow down to every song that the person did, like, and I have no bones about it. Like, this is not my favorite album. I still gotta say, like, I really think that like Living Things is a stronger album than this one. This is definitely better than a thousand suns by a country mile, mind you. But this has a very unique place in the Linkin Park discography because it feels so different. It feels like a necessity, especially now as we look at it in retrospect. And like I said, that's what I mean. It's kind of controversial. If Chester was still alive today, would I still have the same opinion on the lyrical content and have that same feeling? Listening to things the second time, I feel is sort of a necessity at times. There's been many albums that I've mentioned in the past, giving it a second look, giving it a second listen, I feel is mandatory at times to really judge the quality. Sometimes you're not in the mood to hear it. Sometimes your ear's not really picking up and responding. It's not sending your brain the proper signals for maximum enjoyment. You could be tired. You could be in the bad mood. You might not be feeling the music at that particular time. You might not be in the mood. Your brain might not be ready to hear, what is being played through your headphones or through your speakers. So, I might actually have a more positive opinion either way. But I think that strangely enough, I think that the passing does kind of help this album kind of give it a place in the discography that makes it feel special. That might not necessarily be a bad thing, even if it can seem a little bit controversial. I can see where people might say, like, well, to say just because he died, the album is good. I don't know if that's necessarily wrong or what kind of taste it's considered to be in, but that's just my opinion on it. So, yeah, I like One More Light. If you haven't listened to this one in quite some time, I would suggest that you do give it a second listen. And if you listen to the criticism and that was the reason that you didn't listen to it, well, I always have to tell you guys, like, don't listen to other people. If you want to listen to something, don't let anyone tell you that it's bad. Go and listen to it for yourself and form your own opinion. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Let's discuss it down below. What did you think about this album when it came out? Do you like it better now? Do you hate it more? Do you feel the same? And if you like the video, hit a thumbs up on it. And if you fucking hated it, hit a thumbs down. Tell me that my opinion is disgusting and that's wrong. You know, you could do that too. I'd appreciate any kind of feedback, really. And I want to thank all my patrons for your continued support. And I'll see you next time, guys.